In this lesson, we'll learn how to begin assigning materials to geometry inside our Maya scenes. Okay, great. So I want you to check the project files for this particular lesson. And what you'll find in the Scenes folder is this Lesson 8 Begin file. And it's just got some sort of simple and abstract geometry inside of it. And I want to go ahead and begin sort of running through the process of how we can create a material and apply it to some of this geometry. So let's go ahead and go to the split hypershade perspective view here. And what I want to do first is let's go ahead and create a surface material. I'll just come in here and drop in a blend for right now. And if we go ahead and double click on this blend, we can get to the attribute editor. And let's just come over and click on this color right here. We'll just assign sort of a simple color. Let's just go ahead and maybe, let's just choose sort of this bluish green color right here. Maybe sort of something like that. Fantastic. So this particular blend has been created for us, but it doesn't yet have any objects in our scene that have this particular material applied. And there's a few different ways to sort of begin this process. Let me go ahead and hit Control A just to close out of my attribute editor for right now. And one of the easiest ways to apply this blend number 1 to some of the geometry here is, let's say we wanted to apply it to maybe this abstract kind of piece of artwork here. So we'll just simply middle click on our material, drag it over to our perspective viewport, and drop it on that particular piece of geometry. Well, that's pretty simple, right? Well, yeah, it is. And that's not the only way that we can assign this material. Because what if there's multiple objects here? So instead of middle clicking and dragging and dropping, doing it over, there's actually an easier way to do this. So what we could do is maybe select a sphere here, maybe this sphere here, and how about this guy back here? Maybe we want to assign it to all 3 of these different sphere geometries. So what we can do here is we can actually do this a couple of ways. We can come over to our material and simply right click and hold on the material and drag straight up and assign the material to selection. If we do that and just deselect those guys, you can see here that we've assigned that material to all 3 of those pieces of geometry here. Pretty easy. So there's actually another way. Let's say maybe we're not inside of the hypershade. We're just inside of our perspective view. And we want to assign that same material to this particular sphere right here. What I can do is I can simply right click, and if I come down here to assign existing materials, we can come in here and we can assign blend number 1, just like so. Before I do that, though, you can see here that we can actually assign a new material here. Let's do that. We'll just come in here and assign a new material, and you'll see here that this particular dialog comes up. Again, what we can do here is we can come to the Maya surfaces and maybe choose blend, just like so, and you can see that it's going to pop us into our attribute editor. Now, right now, we have the wrong tab selected, so let's come over to this blend 2 tab, and I'll just come in here and assign the same color. All right, great. So let me close out of our attribute editor here. We'll deselect that sphere. So this is kind of the process of assigning materials that you've created here inside of the hypershade to geometry that exists in your scene. Now, let me just jump over here, and we now have 2 identical blends here. So let me just go ahead and maybe bring down blend number 2 here so we can see them both at the same time. Fantastic. So obviously we have 2 really identical materials here, basic blends with the same color assigned to them. What if we wanted to know exactly which material was assigned to which piece of geometry? Maybe another artist created this, or maybe we created it the day before, or maybe before our lunch break, and now we can't exactly remember which geometry we've assigned a material to. Well, you'd be surprised how often situations like this come up, and it's actually pretty simple to solve. Let's just select blend number 1 here first. What we could do is we can come over here and simply right click on this material and choose to select objects with the material. And you can see here inside of my perspective viewport, the objects that have this material assigned are now selected. Let me just click away from them here. We can come over here and do the exact same thing with our blend number 2. select objects with material, and there you go. You see here we now have just this single sphere selected. Now I'm going to come over here and just assign an existing material, blend number 1, to that particular piece of geometry here. And I want to go ahead and just really quickly talk a little bit about what you should never do. I know it may be tempting as you're just getting into Maya, but Lambert 1 is created with each and every scene that you create, and you should never use this as part of a shading network. This is kind of a nice place to go back to if you ever want to assign just a default material to a piece of geometry. This would be your default material. This is the material that every new piece of geometry that you create inside of Maya will receive by default. Lambert 1. Never make that a part of your shading networks. Okay, great. So with that little disclaimer said, let's come in here and let's go ahead and just take blend number 2 here. And I want to show you what happens if we delete this guy. Remember, blend number 1 is the one we have assigned throughout our scene. And if I just simply hit the delete key on my keyboard, what you'll notice here is that our geometry turns kind of this ugly green color. This color, if you ever see geometry with it, should set off a little warning bell in the back of your mind, because this indicates that the material that was assigned to this geometry has been deleted. So what can we do to fix this particular situation? Well, we had a duplicate here, but instead of using that guy, I'm just going to hit the Control-Z key on my keyboard just a couple of times so we can undo back to where we still have our blend number 1 here. And you can see that material again is showing up on our objects here. Okay, fantastic. Now, a moment ago we were talking about sort of identifying the material that's assigned to a particular object. Well, sometimes you don't approach this from a material level. You approach this from a geometry level. And so instead of maybe picking out which piece of geometry this material is assigned to, you're staring at a scene with lots of pieces of geometry, and maybe you want to know what material is assigned to just this particular piece of it. Well, we can kind of approach this in the exact opposite way as well. So if I were to come over and open my attribute editor, what you'll see up here is we have these tabs. And if you come over here, usually pretty far to the right, you'll find the material that's currently assigned to it. And again, there is our blend number 1. So it's a little bit of detective work, and you can approach this a couple of different ways, either based on maybe the geometry or what material is assigned to that, or if you're over in the hypershade, figuring out which geometry has a particular material assigned. Okay, great. So the last thing I want to show you in this lesson is a really useful tool, because as you're working on a scene, you may end up with lots of different materials in here. Maybe some of them you've used, some of them you have began building a shading network for, and you've kind of abandoned that shading network. Well, this is all just data that's cluttering up your scene, bloating your file size. So what you can do here, if you are absolutely positive that you don't need any of the shading networks that are currently not assigned to geometry, what you can do here inside the hypershade is you can come up to the Edit menu and choose to delete the unused nodes. Now when I choose this, watch what happens, not just in my work area down here, but also up here in my Materials tab. You'll notice here that all unused materials have been now removed from my scene. So really all I'm left with here is blend number 1, and that's the lone material that we have assigned to the geometry in our scene. All right, fantastic. With that said, let's go ahead and move on to our next lesson, and let's learn a little bit about organizing your shaders here inside of Maya.